Amina had been working at the Nairobi Grand Hotel for nearly 3 years. Every morning before sunrise she would wake up in her small, crowded home where she lived with her younger brother and her mother. The room was tiny with a cracked wall and a single worn-out mattress, but it was home. Despite the small space and the lack of comfort, Amina always started her day with a quiet determination. She knew that every day she worked meant a few shillings more to buy food for her family, to pay the small rent, and to help her brother go to school. She never complained even though the work was hard and sometimes unfair. Cleaning hotel rooms was tiring, and sometimes the hotel staff expected perfection in ways that felt impossible. But Amina moved through her day with care, because she believed that hard work, honesty, and persistence could change her life. The Nairobi Grand Hotel was one of the city's largest hotels, known for its luxury suites, marble floors, and polished silver fixtures. Amina knew every corner of the hotel, from the lobby to the housekeeping storage room. She moved quickly and efficiently, carrying fresh towels, dusting furniture, and making beds with careful precision. She had become an expert at her job, able to tidy up a large suite in record time without leaving a trace of dust. She did this while maintaining a smile and polite words for every guest, no matter how demanding. Her supervisors had noticed her dedication, but there was never extra pay or recognition. Still, Amina's hope came not from praise, but from the belief that every effort she made would someday lead to something better. On one particular evening, after a long and grueling day, Amina entered the 12th floor suite assigned to her for cleaning. The suite belonged to one of the hotel's most famous guests, a billionaire named Daniel Mwangi. Amina did not know that at the time. All she saw was another room that needed to be spotless before the guest arrived. She began her work with practiced hands, dusting the tables, polishing the silverware, changing the linens, and placing fresh flowers on the bedside table. The suite was enormous, with high ceilings, soft rugs, and heavy curtains that framed a view of the city skyline. Amina's heart raced as she worked because she always wanted to do a perfect job, but she also felt a deep exhaustion weighing down her limbs. Her back ached, her feet throbbed, and her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. By the time she finished, the hotel was nearly empty for the night. The hustle and bustle of daytime guests had faded into silence, and only the faint sound of the city far below reached the suite. Amina felt the weight of the day pressing against her body. She glanced at the luxurious bed, noticing how soft and inviting it looked. She told herself she could not, she had to stay awake, but her body did not listen. The fatigue she had ignored for hours finally won. One moment she was straightening pillows and the next she sank gently into the sheets. Her eyes closed before she could resist, and the warm comfort of the mattress and the soft pillows pulled her into a deep sleep. Amina dreamed vaguely of her family, of her mother smiling while preparing dinner, of her brother laughing as he played outside. The dreams were brief, but they carried a warmth she had not felt in days. Outside the suite, the lights of the hotel glimmered, and the quiet hum of the elevators echoed softly down the hallway. No one passed by the door and the suite remained still. Amina's breathing became slow and even, as though she had become part of the room itself. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniel Mwangi, the billionaire, had been in Nairobi for business, attending meetings and events across the city. He was known as a man of influence, with power and wealth that few could imagine. He stayed in the hotel's most expensive suite, valuing privacy and comfort above all. On that evening he returned earlier than expected, hoping to rest before an important dinner. He had never met Amina, of course, and certainly did not know that a young cleaner had been working in his suite for hours. The thought that anyone could have fallen asleep there never crossed his mind. The moment when he entered the suite, Amina stirred. She woke with a sudden start, her heart pounding in her chest. The unfamiliar sight of a tall, sharply dressed man standing in the doorway froze her in place. Panic swept through her. She sat up quickly, her hands pressed to her chest, unsure whether she should apologize, explain, or flee. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she realized where she was. She had been sleeping in the bed of someone incredibly important, someone whose life was nothing like hers. The man looked at her for a few moments. There was a silence so heavy that Amina could hear her own heartbeat. She wanted to speak, to beg for forgiveness, to explain herself, but no words came. All she could do was lower her gaze and hope that he would not be angry. The fear inside her was sharp, as though she had stepped into a world far above her own, a world where one small mistake could destroy her life. She imagined her supervisors discovering the incident, imagining the scandal, the complaints, and the shame. Yet as she looked at him, she noticed something different. The man did not shout or scold her. He did not frown. His eyes held curiosity, almost as if he were trying to understand rather than condemn. Amina could not help but notice the gentleness in his gaze, the patience that lingered even as he stood in the doorway. This surprised her. She had expected anger or a lecture or at least frustration. But none of that came. The room seemed to grow quiet around them. The only sounds were the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant city lights flickering outside the window. Amina could feel her pulse slowing even as her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. She realized that this moment, so small and so sudden, might change more than just her evening. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be, and how unexpected events could place two completely different worlds together for a brief instant. In that quiet, the exhaustion that had pulled her into sleep seemed almost sacred. Amina realized that her tired body had betrayed her, yes, but also that her courage in simply surviving each day had brought her to this moment. She looked at the man once more, ready to apologize, ready to accept whatever consequences would come. She was exhausted, embarrassed, but also quietly proud of the life she was leading, a life of perseverance, care, and responsibility. Mr. Daniel Mwangi had just finished a long meeting in the city, one that had run longer than he expected. His schedule had been packed with appointments, calls, and briefings, leaving him little time for rest. He had intended to check into his suite later in the evening, but plans had changed, and he now found himself walking through the quiet corridors of the Nairobi Grand Hotel much earlier than he had expected. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was silent, except for the soft hum of the machinery. Daniel had stayed in many hotels before, but he always preferred this one. It was familiar, luxurious, and the staff were known to be competent and discreet. He thought little of the housekeeping staff beyond the professional manner in which they maintained the suites. To him, the rooms were always ready, always perfect, and always anonymous. When he reached his suite and opened the door, he was surprised to see someone inside. There, on the large king-size bed, lay a young woman fast asleep. She was dressed in simple work clothes, a uniform that identified her as part of the hotel staff. At first, Daniel froze, unsure how to react. This was not what he had expected. His initial instinct was to feel intrusion. After all, this was his private space. But as he looked closer, he noticed the soft rise and fall of her chest, the way her hands rested lightly on the bed, and the subtle tension in her posture that spoke of exhaustion. Daniel's surprise slowly gave way to understanding. He realized that she must have been working extremely hard to reach this point of exhaustion. The sweat on her brow, the smudges of dust on her sleeves, and the faint lines of tiredness on her face all told a story of long hours, physical effort, and persistence. She was not careless or disrespectful. She was simply human, a young woman giving her all in a world that required her to fight for every small piece of stability. He quietly stepped closer, careful not to startle her. He observed the neatness of the bed she had been tending to before she dozed off. The pillows were perfectly arranged, the sheets tucked with care, and the little touches of order she had added demonstrated that she took pride in her work. Daniel could see that her tiredness had not stopped her from doing her job well. There was a quiet dignity in her efforts, even if she had fallen asleep in the wrong place at the wrong time. As he watched her sleep, Daniel thought about his own life. He had wealth, influence, and power, and he had always prided himself on efficiency and control. Yet, as he looked at this young woman, he realized that there were lives unfolding beyond his own, lives full of struggle, responsibility, and courage. Here was someone who did not have his resources, yet managed to survive with grace and resilience. Her exhaustion was a reminder that life was not the same for everyone, and that the world was full of people who worked tirelessly without recognition. The more Daniel observed, the more he felt a shift inside himself. He understood that the young woman was not guilty of wrongdoing. She had not broken any rules intentionally, she had simply reached a point where her body and mind demanded rest. He imagined what it must be like to live her life, to work long hours with little reward, to worry about family, to carry the weight of responsibility on young shoulders. A pang of empathy touched him, something he had not often allowed himself to feel in the midst of boardroom meetings and business negotiations. He moved slightly, careful not to disturb her. The light from the lamps in the suite illuminated her features softly, and he could see that her skin was smooth but marked with the traces of hard work. There was humility in the way she had positioned herself on the bed, a quiet honesty in her sleeping form. Daniel's mind wandered to thoughts about human dignity and effort. Here was a person whose life was tough, whose challenges were real, yet she carried herself without complaint. That realization filled him with respect for her courage and determination. He noticed the small details in the room, the dusting she had done around the nightstands, the neat folding of towels, the small care she had taken to leave the room in order even as she allowed herself a brief moment of rest. It spoke of pride and professionalism, even under exhaustion. Daniel realized that in his own life he rarely saw this kind of dedication. He had employees who worked for him, yet he did not always take the time to recognize their commitment or their personal sacrifices. In that quiet moment, he felt humbled by the simplicity and honesty of her work. Minutes passed and Daniel remained silent. He did not scold, he did not yell, and he did not call anyone to reprimand her. Instead, he stood there, absorbing the scene and allowing himself to reflect. He thought about how many people like her were in the world, people who worked silently, often unnoticed, yet who carried the burdens of their families, their communities, and their dreams. He felt a connection to her that he could not explain, a recognition of human effort and resilience. As he continued to watch, Amina stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering as she began to wake. She had been in a deep sleep, but the soft movement and quiet presence of the man in the room drew her from her rest. She opened her eyes slowly, and when she saw Daniel standing there, her first reaction was fear. Her body stiffened, and she sat up abruptly, unsure of what to say or how to explain herself. The initial shock of the situation made her forget her exhaustion for a moment, replaced by worry and embarrassment. Daniel, however, did not react with anger. Instead, he smiled gently, giving her a sense of calm despite the tense moment. "It's okay," he said softly, almost as if he were talking to himself more than to her. "It's all right." His voice had no hint of accusation. It carried understanding, patience, and an unusual warmth. Amina blinked, confused and uncertain, but relieved that he did not seem angry. She explained herself quickly, her words tumbling out as she apologized profusely. She described her long day, her responsibility to her family, and the exhaustion that had overtaken her. Daniel listened carefully, his expression calm and thoughtful. He realized that her explanation was not an excuse, but a glimpse into a life very different from his own. He began to understand the struggles, hopes, and dedication of someone who worked hard simply to survive. In that quiet moment, Daniel felt admiration for her resilience. She was young, yet her sense of responsibility and duty was remarkable. He realized that while he measured his life in deals and wealth, she measured hers in endurance, care, and integrity. The contrast struck him deeply. He decided then to approach the situation differently. Rather than reacting with punishment or anger, he chose empathy. He offered her reassurance, telling her to take a moment to rest if needed and that no harm had been done. His calmness allowed her to relax, and a small smile appeared on her face despite her embarrassment. She felt seen not as a mistake but as a person with value, effort, and courage. Daniel's initial surprise had shifted into reflection. The young woman in front of him, exhausted and humble, had reminded him of the importance of recognizing the human effort that often went unnoticed. He understood that the world was made up of countless people like her, silent workers, dreamers, and survivors, whose efforts deserved acknowledgement and respect. And in that brief moment of discovery, he saw not just a hotel cleaner, but a young woman with a story, strength, and dignity that demanded recognition. Amina's eyes fluttered open and for a moment she could not focus. The bright lights of the suite, the tall windows showing the Nairobi skyline, and the sudden realization of where she was made her heart pound. She sat up quickly, clutching the edge of the bed, and her mind raced. She had fallen asleep in a room that belonged to a wealthy man she did not know. Her first thought was that she would be fired, scolded, or worse, publicly humiliated. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, and she tried to explain herself in a rush, her words tripping over each other. I am so sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to, I was just very tired. I work long hours and I must have fallen asleep. Please forgive me." She bowed her head, expecting anger to flash in his eyes. She had imagined many outcomes on her way here and most were frightening. Yet when she looked up, she saw that Daniel was not angry. He was standing calmly, observing her with a patient and thoughtful expression. "Take a deep breath," he said softly, his tone gentle and steady. "Sit down. Let's talk." Amina hesitated, unsure if she had permission to relax. Slowly, she lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, still feeling the warmth of the sheets beneath her. Her heart continued to race, but the fear began to ease slightly. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat across from her, folding his hands as he looked at her with genuine interest. "I want to understand," he said. "Tell me about your life. Don't worry about what you think I might think. Just speak honestly." His voice carried no judgment, only curiosity and patience. Amina swallowed hard, unsure if she should reveal so much to a stranger, especially a man so wealthy, so far removed from her world. But something in his manner made her feel safe, almost as if he genuinely wanted to listen. She began quietly, her words tentative at first. "I work every day from early morning until late at night," she said. "I clean many rooms in this hotel. I have to make sure everything is perfect because this is how I earn my living. I live with my mother and my younger brother. My father passed away years ago and my mother is ill sometimes. We have little money and I need to support my family. That is why I work so hard. I don't want to let anyone down." Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, the weight of her honesty carrying more confidence. Daniel listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. He noticed the way her hands fidgeted slightly, the way she avoided his gaze at times, and the quiet strength in her words. He realized that this was not just a mistake of falling asleep. It was the story of a life filled with responsibility, sacrifice, and determination. Each word painted a picture of a young woman who faced hardships most people would struggle to imagine, yet carried herself with humility and grace. "You work very hard," he said after a moment of silence. "I can see that. And you do it with dedication even when life is difficult. That is impressive." His words were not patronizing, they were sincere. Amina looked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Most people in her life saw her as just another worker, another person struggling, another face in the crowd. But here, a billionaire was acknowledging her effort and it felt surreal. She continued to explain, now feeling a strange sense of relief. "Sometimes it is so hard," she admitted softly. "I worry about my mother, about my brother, about paying the bills. Some days I am tired but I cannot stop. I have to keep going because if I stop, who will provide for my family?" Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience and responsibility far beyond her years. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I understand," he said. "I can see that your life is not easy, and yet you face it with courage. That takes more strength than most people have. Many would give up or complain but you keep going." He paused, letting his words sink in. Amina felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, validation, and disbelief. No one had spoken to her like this before. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "You really mean that?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Yes, I do. And I want you to know something important. Your honesty, your courage, and your dedication are remarkable. They deserve respect, not scolding." Amina could hardly believe the words. Respect was not something she often encountered. She was used to being overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. But here it was, freely offered, without condition. The conversation continued for some time. She told him about her dreams, small as they seemed, dreams of helping her brother finish school, maybe one day owning a small shop or business, and finding ways to make life better for her family. Daniel listened carefully to every detail, never interrupting, never judging. He asked questions gently to understand better, and she answered honestly without exaggeration or pretense. He found himself impressed, not only by her dedication but by her clarity and maturity. Here was a young woman who had been forced to grow up quickly, who had carried burdens many adults would struggle to bear, and who still managed to maintain hope, kindness, and humility. Daniel realized that wealth alone could not teach what life had taught her: resilience, courage, and integrity. At one point, Amina paused, catching her breath from speaking so openly. She looked at Daniel, nervous again. "I hope you are not upset," she said, almost whispering. "I didn't mean to fall asleep here." Daniel smiled. "No," he said. "I am not upset. In fact, I am grateful you spoke to me. I wanted to understand your life. Now I do." The tension in the room began to ease. Amina felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fear that had gripped her since she woke up melted slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. She had expected punishment, anger, or humiliation, but instead she found understanding, patience, and even admiration. It was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life. Daniel leaned back in his chair and spoke gently. "Amina, what you do every day is not easy. You work hard to survive, to support your family, and to make life better for those you love. That is something very special. Many people with money or power never learn the lessons you already know." Amina looked at him, feeling a quiet pride mixed with surprise. She had never thought of her struggles in that way, as something admirable, something valuable. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in thought. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Daniel realized that meeting Amina, listening to her story, and understanding her life was more meaningful than any business deal or meeting he had attended that week. For her part, Amina felt seen and understood in a way she had never experienced. Finally, Daniel spoke again. You are strong, honest, and dedicated. That is clear. And your courage to continue every day despite challenges is inspiring. Remember that. Amina nodded, tears threatening to fall, but she smiled faintly. She had expected anger or punishment, but instead she had found respect, patience, and understanding. After listening to Amina's story, Daniel Mwangi felt a deep sense of responsibility. He realized that her exhaustion in his suite was not just a simple mistake, it was a signal of a life filled with struggle and effort. He could have scolded her, asked her to leave, or treated the situation as a breach of rules. But instead he chose a different path. He wanted to turn this moment into something meaningful, something that could change the course of her life. He saw in her not just a tired hotel cleaner, but a young woman full of potential, courage, and determination. Sit down, Amina, he said kindly. I want to help you if you'll allow me. Amina blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. She had expected anger, not an offer of help. Help me, she whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes, I see how hard you work. I know how difficult life can be. You deserve a chance to make your own future, to learn and to grow. His words filled the room with warmth and hope, something Amina had not felt in a long time. He began by offering guidance. He explained to her that education and skill building were powerful tools that could change her life. He talked about simple courses, online classes, and community programs that could teach skills in business, accounting, and communication. He explained that knowledge was not limited to schools and universities. It could be accessed in small, practical ways. Amina listened carefully, realizing that her dreams of supporting her family could be expanded into bigger possibilities. She could learn, she could plan, and she could create opportunities for herself. Daniel also offered mentorship. He told Amina that he would personally guide her, answer her questions, and provide advice whenever she needed it. He shared stories from his own life, times when he had made mistakes, and how learning from those experiences had helped him grow. He explained that wealth was valuable, but wisdom, courage, and perseverance were what truly shaped a person's future. Amina felt a mix of surprise and gratitude. She had never imagined that someone with so much power and influence would take the time to guide her. Next, Daniel discussed practical opportunities. He offered to connect her with small business programs in the city, opportunities for microloans, and workshops that could teach her how to start a small enterprise. He emphasized that she did not need to stay limited to cleaning hotel rooms her whole life. With careful planning, dedication, and persistence, she could create a business, provide for her family, and even help others in her community. Amina's mind raced with possibilities. She thought about the little sewing projects she had done for friends, the small sales she had made in her neighborhood, and how those could grow into something bigger. For the first time in years, Amina began to imagine a life beyond exhaustion, beyond struggle, and beyond survival. She imagined waking up not only to work but to opportunities that excited her. She imagined learning new skills, building a small business, and helping her family in ways she had never dared to dream. Each idea filled her heart with hope and determination. She realized that the future was not something fixed or impossible. It was something she could shape with guidance, effort, and courage. Daniel encouraged her to take small steps. You do not need to do everything at once, he said. Start with one skill. Learn it well. Then move to the next. Life is about progress, not speed. Amina nodded, feeling a sense of relief. The idea of change had felt overwhelming before, but his advice made it seem manageable. One step at a time, she could build a life she had only imagined in her quietest dreams. He also emphasized the importance of perseverance. There will be challenges, Daniel warned. There will be days when you feel tired, discouraged, or uncertain. But remember why you started. Remember your goals, your family, and your dreams. That will keep you moving forward. Amina felt a deep sense of determination rise inside her. She realized that challenges were not barriers, they were part of the journey, tests of strength and resilience. Daniel offered more than just advice and encouragement. He provided tangible resources. He gave her access to online learning platforms, books, and programs where she could gain practical skills. He introduced her to community workshops on business planning and financial management. He even arranged for her to meet other young women who had started their own small businesses, showing her examples of what was possible. Each step made the future feel closer, more attainable, and full of promise. Amina spent the following weeks absorbing everything she could. She dedicated herself to learning, waking up early to complete online lessons, practicing skills in her small free time, and applying what she learned in simple ways. She started to sketch plans for a small business, perhaps a tiny shop selling handmade crafts or providing services in her neighborhood. Each small accomplishment brought her more confidence and fueled her hope. She felt the exhaustion of hotel work lessen slightly because now her mind was filled with purpose, with direction, and with dreams she could actively pursue. Her friends and family noticed the change in her. Her younger brother looked at her with admiration, inspired by her renewed energy. Her mother smiled, feeling hope for their family that had been absent for years. Amina shared her excitement cautiously, but her determination was clear. She spoke of classes she was taking, plans for a small business, and new skills she was learning. Her family began to believe in her in ways they had never imagined before. For Daniel, watching Amina transform was rewarding in a way no business deal could match. He realized that this small act of offering guidance and opportunity had far-reaching consequences. It could lift a family, inspire a community, and empower a young woman who had only known struggle. He saw that wealth was not just a collection of money, it was a tool to help others realize their potential. Amina herself felt the power of possibility for the first time. She no longer saw herself as a young cleaner trapped in endless work. She saw a path forward, a series of steps she could take to create a better life. She felt capable, prepared, and supported. Each lesson she learned, each connection she made, each skill she practiced, strengthened her vision of a future beyond cleaning hotel rooms. A future where she could thrive, provide for her family, and help others along the way. Amina could hardly believe how much her life had changed in such a short time. When she first met Daniel Mwangi in his suite, she had been exhausted, anxious, and uncertain about her future. Now, months later, she was a young woman transformed, not just in skill but in confidence and hope. Every day, she worked on her small business, selling handmade crafts and providing small services in her neighborhood. She had learned how to manage money, how to market her products, and how to plan for growth. Each day brought new challenges, but instead of fear, she felt excitement. She had a vision for her life, and she was determined to make it real. Daniel continued to check in with her, offering advice and encouragement. He visited her shop occasionally, observing how she interacted with customers and giving tips on improving her business. At first, Amina had felt nervous when he came, but soon she saw his visits as opportunities to learn and grow. His guidance was practical and kind. He never told her what to do, only suggested possibilities and encouraged her to think creatively. Over time, Amina noticed that she was making decisions confidently, solving problems on her own, and taking pride in her achievements. The community began to notice Amina's success too. Neighbors came to her shop, curious about the young woman who had started with almost nothing and now ran her own business. Parents brought their children to learn from her, inspired by the determination and courage she had shown. Some young women approached her for advice, seeking guidance on how they could start small projects of their own. Amina shared her experiences openly, telling them about her work, her struggles, and the support she had received from Daniel. She became a symbol of hope for many, a living example of how perseverance, hard work, and a little help could change lives. Amina also noticed changes in herself. She no longer felt overwhelmed by exhaustion or worry. The lessons she had learned, planning, skill building, patience, and resilience, made her feel capable of facing almost any challenge. She felt proud of her work and accomplishments, something she had rarely experienced before. Her family too felt the impact. Her younger brother now had school supplies, books, and a sense of hope for the future. Her mother smiled more often, relieved that the burden she had carried alone for so long was now shared with a daughter who could help lead the family toward stability. Daniel observed Amina's growth with satisfaction. He realized that the moment he found her asleep in his suite had been more than a simple incident. It had been an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. The young woman he had once seen as tired and humble had become strong, independent, and respected in her community. He felt a sense of pride in having supported her, but he also learned from her determination and courage. He understood that influence and wealth were most meaningful when used to uplift others, and Amina had shown him the power of human potential. Over time, Amina's small business grew steadily. She expanded her products, learned more advanced skills, and began collaborating with other local entrepreneurs. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and in the possibilities of the future. She also began mentoring other young people, teaching them about skill building, business, and resilience. She shared the lessons she had learned about patience, planning, and determination, encouraging others to pursue their dreams even when life seemed difficult. Her story became a source of inspiration, proof that even those who start with little could achieve great things with effort, guidance, and perseverance. The incident in the hotel suite had started as a simple accident, but it had sparked a series of changes that transformed both their lives. Amina had moved from exhaustion and uncertainty to confidence and independence. Daniel had moved from a man of wealth and business focus to someone who understood the deeper impact of compassion and guidance. The unexpected meeting had created a bond between them, a connection based on mutual respect and learning. For both, it was a reminder that life could change in a single moment if one chose to act with understanding and kindness. Amina often reflected on that day in the suite. She remembered waking up startled, expecting anger, and instead finding patience and guidance. She realized that her life had shifted not because of luck alone, but because someone had seen her potential and helped her recognize it. Her journey was a combination of her own effort, the lessons she had learned, and the support she received. It was a story she carried with humility and pride, always remembering where she had come from and the obstacles she had overcome. The young woman who had once dozed off in a billionaire's bed was now a leader in her small community. She showed others how to turn effort into opportunity, how to face challenges with courage, and how to embrace learning as a path to growth. Her shop became more than a place to buy products. It became a center for inspiration, learning, and hope. Children and adults alike looked up to her, seeing in her story a chance for their own dreams to come alive. Daniel continued to support her quietly, offering advice and encouragement but letting Amina take the lead. He had learned that empowerment was more powerful than control. By giving her the tools, knowledge, and confidence she needed, he had helped her grow into someone capable of guiding others. Their relationship was no longer defined by a single incident in a hotel room but by the ongoing journey of transformation, learning, and mutual respect. The lives of both Amina and Daniel had been forever changed by that single unexpected moment. A simple accident had created a ripple of opportunity, growth, and hope. Amina's story inspired her community, gave her family stability, and showed that perseverance and courage could overcome even the toughest circumstances. Daniel learned the value of empathy and the real impact of helping others reach their potential. Together, their lives were a living example of how kindness, opportunity, and determination could transform not just one life but many.